order. This is the July 18, 2003 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Ralph Robinette. I am chairman of the commission and will chair this meeting. At this time, we will now introduce our council liaison, other members of the commissioners, and staff.
Rick Mihalovich, council liaison, and I apologize in advance. I need to go across the hallway at about 5:30.
Mike Lester.
Jack Deacon.
Bob George.
Dave Nunn.
Ian Strotman.
Kevin Thanen.
Shane Wade, city staff.
Eric Barron, city staff.
Janice McMillan, city staff, and I'd also like to introduce Jamie Abbott, our neighborhood services coordinator.
Jeremy Cover, law department.
The City Council authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of any regular members. Therefore, you will vote tonight, Kevin. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I hereby declare that a quorum is present. Our regular members absent tonight are Chris Yarnell, Chris Jordan, Dean DeToy. Are there any members who wish to disqualify themselves or excuse themselves from voting on any agenda item? Seeing none, we will go forward. We have one case on the agenda tonight. It is case P13010, 2500 Tanner Bridge Place preliminary PUD plan. Is someone here that will represent that? Mr. Bates, do you wish for a continuance? Are you ready to go forward? We will go forward. Okay, at this time, we will have the staff give us a format of the hearing and order of testimony. Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the Planning Commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so I ask that when you speak, please step to the microphone and give your name and address for the record. After a brief introduction by city staff, the applicant and applicant's consultants and advisors will explain the project. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes. The applicant shall be given 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if so requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from any opponents of the request. And we will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. The testimony from supporters, opponents, or other interested parties shall be limited to 3 minutes, and rebuttal testimony shall be limited to 5 minutes unless permission is granted by the commission for additional time. City staff will then describe the proposal and make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including the staff reports, applicable findings, ordinances, and our statutes, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. And the commission will then close testimony from the floor, and the commission will then discuss the proposal, then make a motion on the request. The form of the motion shall be positive. That is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with any modifications, stipulations, or conditions. And a final vote will then be taken, ayes in favor, nays opposed. And the chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. And the following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the city code as amended, the comprehensive plan and land use map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and our renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, the staff reports, the minutes of proceedings, letters, photos, memoranda, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, and the rules of procedure for the Jefferson City, Missouri Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and are available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. And please be advised that any items that are presented to the Planning Commission this evening become property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, renderings, petitions, and letters.
We have no request for continuance. Therefore, the chair at this time will entertain a motion to accept the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adoption of the amendment agenda as printed indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The agenda is adopted. You also have in your packet the June minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll give you about a minute or 2 to look at those if you want to. looking at the minutes now, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, Mr. Vaughn, please, you're a member of the commission.
Dale Vaughn.
Anyone have any corrections to the minutes?
I just saw a minor correction about my reappointment. It should be to the Environmental Quality Commission. It says to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, thank you. We will make that correction. Any other corrections? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the amendments as corrected. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. You also have in your packet, we have one communication regarding one of the cases this evening. If you've not had a chance to read it, why it's in your packet, you can go read it at this time. Okay, new business. Case P13010, 2500 Tanner Bridge Road, Place, preliminary PUD plan. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to orient you to the location of this request. Up on the screen is a location map showing the area of the request and also highlighting the property. There's a little bit more going on this map than the typical map that I start with. First, let me point out that the yellow line is the city limit line. So areas to the south are actually in unincorporated Cole County, so we're very close to the city limit line. Second, the request is actually only for a piece of the property, not the entire thing. The property happens to be split by zoning, so there's two separate zoning districts on the property. Part of the property being zoned to PUD, planned unit development, and a large portion of the property further away from the road being zoned RS2, a single-family residential zoning district. But first, the location of the property is on a short stub of a street located off of Lorenzo Green Drive that's named Tanner Bridge Place. What it is Tanner Bridge Road, which you can see here and then also toward the bottom of the map, used to go straight across where Lorenzo Green Drive is, and straight across where Route B was built, and straight to the south. Whenever Lorenzo Green Drive was constructed, and of course at the time it was called Route B, Tanner Bridge Road used to go straight across that. Then when the new Route B was constructed, it divided Tanner Bridge Road, and so there's a short stub of a street located there. This street is only a couple hundred feet long and has two houses on it. One of the houses is on the property that's under consideration tonight. The other house, apologize for my mouse, is located right there, so just south of property. I've got an aerial photo of the property, which is a little bit more blown up. You'll see it's not labeled, but Lorenzo Green Drive is right here. And then Tanner Bridge Place starts right here and goes on and goes just a little bit further off the screen to the south. And the property's highlighted in yellow. There's an existing house on the property. And the PUD zone portion of the property, the boundary line between zoning districts is this dotted line there. So, going back to the previous picture or location map, you can kind of see that it's only for a portion of the property. The request is a preliminary PUD plan for that portion of PUD zone property to construct a restaurant. And the applicant has put together this is the preliminary PUD plan. It shows the restaurant and the parking lot that would surround it. A fairly typical development plan for a restaurant, with one notable exception. The applicant is actually proposing to construct a larger driveway, essentially built to city street standards, to serve as a future connection to the rear of the property, that larger portion of the property that's zoned single-family residential, when that may actually when that street may actually be constructed to get all the way back to the rear property is anyone's guess. But in order to accommodate it now for that future possibility, this street right here, or this driveway, is being constructed as a city street. It would not be dedicated to the city, but it would be built to city standards so that it could possibly be dedicated in the future. Other than that, just to point out a few items on the preliminary PUD plan. There is a parking lot shown, and the number of parking spaces meets the typical requirement for a restaurant. Regarding permitted uses, which is an item within any PUD plan, what uses would be permitted on the property. They are proposing a C1 neighborhood commercial underlying zoning district, so all of the uses within the C1 district would be permitted for the property. That, of course, includes restaurants, and their plan is to build it as a restaurant. There is a building design that was included with the application, and so this is a rendering of what the building would look like. It's a two-story structure with 3,000 square feet on the main floor and 1,500 square feet on the lower floor. I believe the intent is to have how do I put it? The restaurant, normal restaurant seating on the main floor, and then the lower floor to be available for banquets and things like that. Here's another rendering, which gives you includes the lower level from the opposite side. There's also outdoor seating that is proposed on the drawing. Signage and lighting would again both be geared toward the C1 neighborhood commercial zoning district. Other than that, I do have a photo of the existing property. This is standing on Tanner Bridge Place, looking north, and I did my best to merge two pictures together to give you a little bit better idea. But you can see Lorenzo Green Drive here on the far right of the picture, and then this is the existing house that is constructed. The house would, of course, be demolished in order to make room for the development plan of a restaurant. There's one other thing that I'll point out in regards to buffer yards. What they're proposing is to not have any buffer yards on this development. The property, and I apologize, this particular PUD drawing, north is, you'll see it north is to the left rather than straight up. But the property to the west or to the south, which is the other single family home on Tanner Bridge Place, the short stub of a road, is being used residentially, and typically between two separate zoning districts, there would be a buffer yard constructed between them. They're proposing not to construct a buffer yard, and the buffer yard note down there explains their rationale for that proposal is that the other property, along with this one, are both identified as being intended for commercial development within the development plan map of the comprehensive plan. And so I think they're anticipating a future commercial use of that property. But I'll leave it to them to describe that in more detail. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any initial questions you may have.
Any questions of staff at this time?
Okay, and it's probably best to look at this air photo. It's a little bit easier. The creek is entirely on right of way, and so it's located right along there. Okay, the development plan for the property would first have a 60-foot wide driveway, or yeah, intended to be 50. Is that right? Oh, it's 60. Yeah. Okay. First, there would be a 60-foot wide strip of property adjacent to the creek that would be intended for a future road, and then they would build their driveway to road standards within that 60-foot strip. And so then beyond that, the actual restaurant would sit. I believe it's almost where the house is, and leading into the backyard of the house, so about right there.
Any other questions of staff at this time?
Yes, and okay. Well, do you want to describe it now? Okay.
Yeah, it carries basically an area boundary, Christie Drive up through, it carries quite a bit of area, watershed area through there. City does have a future detention basin planned upstream from the area.
Okay. Any other questions of staff at this time? Okay. We will now take the public testimony. Who is here to present case P13010?
Good evening. My name is John Graham.
Would you come forward to the mic and give your name and address, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Graham, 1215 Dry Creek Road, Jefferson City, Missouri. Commonly referred to as Johnny. I grew up here in town. I've been a chef all my life, or all my adult life, and after traveling and working in a number of different places around this country, I've decided to come home and make a living and a home for myself back here, and this is what I'm proposing to do. I'd like to build a restaurant that's basically everything I can bring into the place would be sourced locally to support the local community rather than sending my money away, or our money away, to the customers and the people that I buy things from, to larger big box restaurants, to actually use our own local farmers and produce whenever necessary, and have a real sort of community center kind of feel. It's my intent for it to sort of have the feel of an old barn, with a large stone fireplace, as you can probably see in the pictures there, to be in evenings, evening service Tuesday through Saturday nights, and a Sunday brunch, and then possibly serving some coffee in the mornings in a sort of grab and go situation. If I can answer any of your questions about it, I'd be happy to. I do thank you for your time and having me here.
Anyone have any questions, Mr. Graham, at this time? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here would like to speak in favor of this proposal?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. I think Johnny is very modest when he tells you that he has worked as a chef most of his life. He's really traveled between the East Coast and the West Coast being LA, and the East Coast being most recently Martha's Vineyard. And I think he's bringing something to Jeff City that we don't have a lot of. So it's kind of a unique experience, and I don't think he's presented himself as I would have had I been making his introduction. So we're kind of excited about this, and our connection with this property dates back. Stephen Carr here, representing the family, dates back to, I'm going to guess, the mid to late 50s. The Carr family has owned it for that long. Obviously, the area has changed a great deal with the construction of Route B and now Lorenzo Green Parkway, and then of course the new Route B and the 179 Route B interchange. Eric's done a really good job of explaining the plan. It's 22 plus acres. Obviously, when we took a look at the preliminary plan, we don't want to cut off the connectivity. As a matter of fact, we think the next phase of this development would want to utilize the services of the restaurant. So it was our intent to make sure we preserve a corridor for right-of-way. We had some previous experience, and I'll refer to it as the name I knew, the Belshey property. We have a communication from the property next door that as they have looked at the development of their property and as the Highway Department has acquired right-of-way, I think they viewed it as potential for some type of commercial, neighborhood commercial. So the layout that we've come up with, and I think in the presentation that we did for the PUD plan, one of our really good engineers referred to the lower level as the basement. I'd just like for the record to correct that and say maybe that's the terrace level or something of that nature. The comments about stormwater are most appropriate. As a matter of fact, the city has had a master plan looking at a regional detention basin up above, but we won't assume that that's going in place. And if you look at where the Carr family homestead is located, it is high enough, and we will keep our property, our development high enough that regardless of the detention basin, there won't be any stormwater problems. We did walk the site with city staff to ensure that we had enough room to protect the riparian corridor. It is a core regulated stream, and there will be real limitations as to what we could do in regard to the core, the state, and in particular the city. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. We're really kind of excited about this little project.
Any questions of Mr. Bates?
If you wouldn't mind, Mike, could you address the buffer yard and then the
Buffer yard, thank you,
development
Mr. Nunn. What we're seeing here is a portion of this property, and this is the first property to go, although it's been fairly slow as far as the development. We anticipate, and the communication received from the neighbor indicates that they're looking at a similar type development. We think it's very reasonable, since we see that as a transitional piece of property, that the buffer yard is not an issue here. They, if you look at your aerial photography, they set far enough away that I think their hope is that Mr. Graham's development will spur the potential for them to develop their property in a similar nature. And they'll be compatible in use, and therefore the residential buffer yard won't be an issue. I would mention to you that on plate 2 that we passed out to you, you can see the footprint of the building in the surrounded by the driveway and the parking area with the elevated deck area. If you'll look just to the right of that, just going diagonally to the top right-hand corner of the page, you will see the outline of the existing house, which is unoccupied at this time. Be happy to answer any other questions.
Any other questions of Mr. Bates? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Please come forward and give us your name and address, sir.
My name's Gary Belshey. I live at 2506 Tanner Bridge, which is the property immediately adjacent. Is the question here?
Sir, could you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just step closer. But I think there's some background noise. I'm not sure what that is, but we want to make sure the proceedings are being recorded. We just want to make sure.
Yeah, I understand. Can you hear me now? Fine. Am I right? I'm sorry. I speak softly, and lifelong habit, and it's hard to get over. I live next door to the property. Mr. Bates misrepresents me to some extent. There are absolutely no immediate plans for any kind of development on our property. I'm not ruling it out as something for the future, but at this time, you know, I'm not real young myself, and I really plan to spend the rest of my life on that property if I can. Which brings me to the 2 points I have problems with. I'm not opposed to the rezoning per se. Okay, I recognize that commercial planning in that area is going to happen somehow or another, and I have no. I think his plan is fine, and I have no problems with it, except for 2 points. One being the street. Can you show us the plan? Yeah. I see no accommodation of the current Tanner Bridge Place on there, and that concerns me. I don't want my street to be cut off and become an alleyway or something there. So I would ask that you ask Mr. Graham or Mr. Bates to show us somehow that he's going to protect the integrity of the existing street. My other concern is privacy. At the present time, I have a very high degree of privacy there. It's almost totally private, and they're going to eliminate that by not having any kind of a buffer in between us. That section of parking that's at the bottom of the chart, would appear to be within 30 feet of my back door. What I would like would be for the commission to require a buffer yard, a considerable one, hopefully, between the two properties. Are there other questions?
Any questions, Mr. Belcher?
What do you feel would be an adequate buffer yard?
Um,
Like a row of evergreen type trees, or multiple
Yeah,
rows?
something that's done with, I see several done. In fact, I actually have the same issue on the other side of my property from the 179 highway, or the Route B, I'm sorry. And what I have found to be pretty successful is a combination of pines and spreading junipers. The pines give us, because my elevation is much higher than the car property, whatever's there is going to need some height to it. Pine trees provide that. Pine trees, as they grow old, thin out at the bottom. Spreading junipers tend to fill that in. I would hope to have, 20 or 30 feet of dense vegetation in that area would be my preference.
Any other questions, Mr. Belcher? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this proposal?
Good evening. My name is James Brady. I live at 1308 Hoffman Drive in the city of Jefferson. So that's about 2 blocks up the street from the property under consideration. I am not opposed at all to the development of a restaurant there. My concern is with the traffic impact issue. Eric, if you could put up the aerial photo, please. This is a unique intersection, and you can see there how Tanner Bridge comes into Lorenzo Green Drive. And then up there to the right is Hoffman Drive. People who live on Ivan, Camsey, Hoffman Drive, that's their access to Route B or back into the city. That is a busy intersection, and Lorenzo Green is a very high-speed road, very high speed. Now that we have the Vietz restaurant just north of the property under consideration, that's added to the traffic. So my concern is, are the stop signs located at Lorenzo Green and Tanner Bridge and at Tanner Bridge Place and Lorenzo Green sufficient to the task? Is that a safety issue? So I think a traffic impact study is in order, and if the restaurant is successful, we need to be thinking about traffic controls at that unique intersection. That's my issue. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Brady? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this proposal? Seeing none, we will close testimony on the public testimony. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to address a few of the items that were brought up. Let me address the traffic impact first. The city code does require a traffic impact study for any new development that's going to generate 100 or more peak hour vehicle trips. This particular development would not exceed that number, so would not trigger that requirement. To give you an idea of a use that would trigger a traffic impact study is something along the lines of a fast food restaurant that has a very large number of people going through a drive-through restaurant at a, within a 1 hour period. So it wouldn't trigger the requirement for a traffic study, but it's also always something that we as city staff look at. This particular situation, being off of a short stub of a street and having a street intersection that was once, is very similar, to a stop sign situation on across the street, really, but it would not be a safety concern. It is actually less of a concern than if it had a straight driveway access to the main street. But that particular situation would not be a particular concern. And Shane, please jump in if there's anything that you can add to that. Second, regarding the city street, the comment about a future street cutting off Tanner Bridge Place. I don't think that that would be the situation. This would, first is not being platted as right of way, but if it was platted as right of way in the future, it would, have probably some sort of stop situation, stop sign, for example, at Tanner Bridge Place, and would not affect the existing street there. So the two should be able to exist in harmony, so to speak. I don't see that putting an additional street there would affect the access to the other property on Tanner Bridge Place. The third item regarding the buffer yard, under the normal zoning guidelines, buffer yards are required between opposing zoning districts. And what I mean by that is if, for example, this particular property were zoned C1 rather than PUD, and many of the permitted uses and other references within the PUD plan refer to the C1 zoning district. So, imagine it as a piece of property zoned C1, and the neighboring property, which if we look back at our zoning map, is zoned a single-family residential use. Normally, we'd be looking for a type B buffer yard as it's outlined within the zoning code, which would be a 10-foot wide strip of land containing small canopy trees, and there's a list of small canopy trees in the zoning code, at the rate of 5 per 100 linear feet. So it would be a 10-foot wide strip with small canopy trees planted every 20 feet. And then also, unless there is a significant difference in terrain between the two properties, we'd be looking for a 3-foot tall fence. And really the main purpose of that is to keep headlights off of the opposing property. But if the difference in terrain is greater than 3 feet, then that essentially meets that requirement. That's what would normally be required. Now, if you look at the PUD plan, and I apologize, I don't have the exact distances between the driveway and the property line, or the parking area and the property line. It's possible that the consultant could address some of this, but to fit a buffer yard within that space would probably be less than a 10-foot wide buffer yard. It's possible that a fence or something, a solid screening fence of something taller than 3 feet in lieu of trees might be an option, or the Planning and Zoning Commission does have the authority to approve the plan as is without a buffer yard. Other than that, I think Shane also has a staff report on this particular proposal, and after Shane's done, I'll touch on the staff recommendation very quickly.
Thank you, Eric. As far as the engineering summary, as Mike had indicated, the city does have a master plan that does show a future regional detention basin upstream of this property. And also, as Mike and Eric had both indicated, a future street extension has been planned for the development and could occur in the future, but is not occurring at this time as far as something that the city would maintain. In regard to stormwater drainage, all the stormwater that's proposed to drain away from this site is proposed to go to the channel along Lorenzo Green Drive in lieu of detention, and also to consider a stormwater quality benefit. The plan also has considered the natural riparian 25-foot area along that channel, and also a 60-foot stream setback along that channel from Lorenzo Green. The proposed restaurant has been sited outside that area and any other area of potential stormwater drainage flooding. The sanitary sewer does exist on the site, and no additional extension would be needed. The sidewalk plan does show sidewalk along Lorenzo Green Drive. However, it would be noted that there is no curb and gutter, and could potentially be a candidate for a deferral as far as the requirement for the sidewalk. It's a high-speed roadway, and so that's a couple of different options there to ask for a deferral. In regard to street access, as Eric had indicated, we did take a look at the trip generation for the site based upon the square footage of the restaurant. I believe the Saturday peak hour indicated a 62 trips per hour total for the peak hour, and that would be less than the 100 necessary for a traffic impact study. Main access is from Tanner Bridge Place and Lorenzo Green, which is a stop condition on Tanner Bridge Place, and we would not anticipate any additional traffic improvements in conjunction with this proposal. As far as fire hydrants and street lights, additional facilities may be needed and would need to meet our current city standards and requirements. Engineering staff would support the approval of the request.
Any questions of engineering?
Yeah, I had a question on the traffic count. Did you just concentrate on Tanner Bridge and Route B?
Uh,
Or did you include Tanner Bridge and Lorenzo Green?
Well, what it is the trigger for requiring a traffic impact study is how much traffic would be generated by the use. So it's not looking at a particular road, it's looking at how many cars would be traveling to and from the new use. And so literally what that entails is identifying the use and looking up numbers in traffic impact books showing what similar uses have generated, what they've studied and have identified other similar uses as generating. For a restaurant, they've studied a lot of restaurants. We look those numbers up and apply them to the site, and when we did that, we came up with the number of 62 peak hour vehicle trips, which is less than the 100 peak hour trips that would trigger a traffic impact study. And so no further study is required. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I was just concerned about the question that this gentleman referred to. Do you see the intersection that he was referring to? Do you see that being a future problem?
No. I mean, the road, Lorenzo Green Drive, being built originally as a state highway, and the Tanner Bridge Place being a stop road condition, is I mean, that type of situation is actually built to a fairly high standard as it is. With the minimal amount of traffic that a restaurant generates, we don't see that as being a problem for that area.
Any other questions?
I got a couple questions.
Deal.
So, what would the height of the restaurant be higher or lower than the neighbor once it's built? Would it sit higher in elevation?
And I'd probably defer to the consultant on
Okay.
that question.
All right. Yeah.
And Eric, it might help if the photograph you had. The second plate that we provided actually indicates contours, and they're fairly light dash lines. And the location of the house is 1020. Actually, if I'm looking at the grade, Eric, I was talking about the photograph that you actually, I guess this works too, because as you look to the left and go towards Mr. Belshie's, according to the contour map that's on that second plate, we're about 20, Mr. Belshie is about 20 foot higher than the west side of the car property. So his property is actually higher.
Okay.
So, and I did want to say that as we're talking, we certainly have misinterpreted the communication with Mr. Belshie, and we have no problem with the type B buffer that the ordinance requires. It wasn't, and I want to apologize to the commission. I know Johnny made a contact with Mr. Belshie. I'm not saying that we communicated clearly, but it was certainly not our intent to misrepresent his position. And tonight we were given a communication that said individuals with a similar type property were supportive of the request. I mistakenly interpreted that as being a part of the family, the previous family that owned that possibly shared ownership with Mr. Belshie. That was a true misinterpretation on my part, and I just didn't know what address they were referring to, and actually I still don't. So,
yeah, I think over time the development of the restaurant will improve the property value of his property. So, I think you'll be sitting fine. But I do think that a buffer yard is definitely in order, just because of the fact that it's so close to the restaurant. There's going to be outdoor seating. There's going to be probably people outside. I don't know. I think that a buffer yard needs to be in place, but is there enough room for that 10-foot buffer yard?
We think the plan, being that it is preliminary, and looking at it with Johnny back here, we think we can accommodate the type B buffer yard.
Okay.
Just that won't be an issue.
Okay.
If that's the approval requires that won't be a problem for us.
Yep. My only other question would be is if somebody were to pass up the restaurant entrance, is there going to be additional signages that'll say dead end, or no outlet or something like that, so people don't end up in his driveway?
Right. As a matter of fact, there will be signing. The signing has yet to be determined because there's no name, but there would be signing for the restaurant entrance.
And I believe, I need to double check, but I believe there may be a no outlet now. I thought I saw that.
There might be.
Yeah.
I was assuming that there was, but I just didn't want to misstate it.
Sure.
This
If not,
time.
we'll definitely check that, because there needs to be no outlet there.
And I think you're right. I think there is one. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Eric?
Well, the only thing I have left to say is staff recommends approval of the proposed preliminary PUD plan. Of course, much of Lorenzo Green Drive is already developed in a commercial manner, and the property is identified as commercial on the development plan map of the comprehensive plan. Restaurant would be compatible with the existing and proposed uses of the area. The recommended form of the motion is at the bottom of the page of the staff report. You'll see I have one, or our standard condition attached to that recommended form of motion: compliance with comments and technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions. Given what Mr. Bates has said about the type B buffer yard, I would probably attach that also. Establishment of a type B buffer yard along the property line adjacent to the neighboring residence. So that the recommended form of motion would be a motion for approval of the preliminary PUD plan with the following conditions: A, establishment of a type B buffer yard along that property line, and then B, compliance with the comments and technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions. As always, we tend to have a number of minor comments on any of these plans. We do our best to get them in order before the plan comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think that we actually did get our comments back to the consultant in time, and they have resubmitted the plan. We have not had an opportunity to check it over and make sure all those minor comments have been addressed, but we do have the plan and can do that. So hopefully they'll all be addressed, and in that case it'd be in a position to ask them to relabel the buffer yard and then send it on to the planning or to the city council.
How long will that buffer yard be actually? Like, will it be the length of the building, or?
Well, with requiring just simply a type B buffer yard, that would allow them the option to choose which of the type B buffer yards that they would want to install along the property line. And going back to the PUD plan, the type B buffer yard, of course, there's a number of different options, anything from a 10-foot wide strip of land with small canopy trees planted, as I mentioned earlier, to a natural buffer area of 20 feet wide where all the trees and natural vegetation, would be preserved. So if they preserved the existing vegetation and trees in this area, and it was, wooded to begin with, it's possible that might qualify as a natural buffer area. And so the only area where they would have to install the trees and make sure that, I think the ground elevation is sufficient to not require a fence, So basically would be to install trees along that short section there that the parking is adjacent to. That would meet, I believe, again, looking at what they would ultimately propose, but that would appear to meet the requirements of the code for a similar use.
Just quick question, more I guess for my benefit than anything else. The comprehensive plan that shows the commercial development in the area, how far does that extend along Lorenzo Green? How far back on either side of that?
Okay, and I'll go back to the zoning. The area that's identified as commercial essentially is all of the stuff along the west side of Lorenzo Green, and then following this line, and I believe it's this line all the way down to Route B, and then essentially ends there, so that the neighboring residence is identified as commercial, but the property back behind it all is not. So.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Bates, are you happy with that buffer along that parking lot? I know there's a lot of natural cover in that area. There's a lot of natural buffer there.
Mr. Chairman, we're fine with the recommendation.
With the type B buffer in there with consulting of the staff. Is that okay? All right. Okay. Any other questions? Discussion? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the submitted preliminary PUD plan, subject to the establishment of a type B buffer yard along the southerly portion of the property boundary as required by city staff, and also subject to any requirements or changes of the city staff.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
And this...
Eric, you want to tell them what it goes before the council?
Yes, this will be forwarded to the city council, and there will be a public hearing in front of the city council as well. That public hearing would take place on August 19th. Would be here in this room at 5:15 p.m.
Thank you. Other business, schedule report. Michael, do you have an Environmental Quality Commission report for us this evening?
Just that the commission continues to work on your Make Your Mark informational campaign. That's going to be including commission members going before civic and professional groups giving PowerPoint presentations, and there'll be a number of articles in City Magazine and newspaper about the campaign.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for serving on there for us. Okay, we will now have a short report from Jamie Adams, our Neighborhood Service Coordinator for the City of Jefferson City. Jamie?
Good evening, everyone. I'm here before you tonight to discuss the Community Development Block Grant Program. As a requirement by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, there is a requirement for a policy and procedures manual for the program. So essentially, I have developed the policy and procedures program in alignment with HUD's regulations and requirements, and we're basically just formalizing the process that the city has been following all along. I'll take any questions if anyone has them.
And this is all in relation to what you talked to us about previously?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That was very brief.
Yes, I could talk more if you want, but...
It's not what I want. It's commissioners. I have to represent them, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
That was a very excellent report.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other business? Any other reports? Thank you for coming. We're adjourned. See you next month.